Welcome to the Making of CODA, Episode 2. On the first installment, I analyzed the circumstances that forced the band into creating a posthumous album. Today we'll explore the record's editing and compilation process in full. The Making of CODA took place at Soul Studios, England. Jimmy Page purchased the property in the summer of 1980 and was now ready to get his hands busy with Led Zeppelin's 9th studio album. The studio provided Page with a key contributor through British engineer Stuart Epps. He had a long list of credits including 2 key recordings done at Soul Studios, Dutch band Solution Jazz Rock with 1977's Fully Interlocking and Elton John's A Single Man, released in 1978. Epps had the necessary expertise. He knew his way around the Soul's console and room sound, just what Jimmy Page needed. Fun fact, Stuart Epps worked on one of my favorite albums, Kiki D's I've Got the Music in Me. You can check my documentary here on the channel. Jimmy Page's gear at Soul Studios was all about the Roland guitar and effects army. This relationship began in late 1977 with the GR500, which ended up on Into the Outdoors color palette for Kairos Alhambra. This guitar had multiple configurations for massive sustain, vibrato, a sort of 8-bit distortion, and much more. It was basically a keyboard with strings. This was Page's way of keeping up with Jonesy's Yamaha GX1 looking into the future. But Jimmy didn't stop there and expanded his guitar synthesizer arsenal into a Roland G808 unit and a G202 in Candy Apple Red. A promotional shot at Soul Studios captured Jimmy working out his 808 in matching blue jeans, blue shoes, and blue pedalboard. The rest of the gear made Soul Studios a modern environment for creativity. Analog modular synths like the Roland System 100M and 700, a sequencer, the MC8 Microcomposer, a drum machine, the TR-808 Rhythm Composer, and the massive Roland rack, from which Jimmy chose the preamp, stereo flanger, vocoder, and I mentioned the chorus as his effects of choice. Last but not least, Page had the futuristic design of the GR700 plus MIDI controller to dive deep into endless possibilities. So what about the other Zeppelin survivors? John Paul Jones enjoyed his private life away from music headlines, while Robert Plant was just a month away from beginning his low-key Honey Drippers affair. Playing 1950s and 1960s cover tunes in selected locations across the UK became the working ground for what would soon become his official solo career. Now, CODA's mixing timeline is something of a mystery, as there's not that much information on the exact dates. I watched both Stuart Epps' interviews on YouTube, and while he provides very valuable insights on the process, I don't blame him for not remembering the dates. Robert kept himself busy with the Honey Drippers project on and off April through July. Jimmy went full Page on the Death Wish 2 soundtrack in August. Then a month later, Plant went straight to Rockfield Studios in Wales for intense rehearsal and recording sessions for Pictures at 11. Page, Plant and Jones reunited for a one-off charity event at the Golden Pub on December 15, 1981. It was close to ELP's Manticore Studios, where Zeppelin rehearsed back in late 1976. A strange full circle, and the world would have one last Zeppelin album to enjoy. By March 1982, Soul Studios was in full force. Stuart Epps worked as producer and engineer on 3 records, Wishbone Ash's Twin Barrels Burning, plus Vandenberg's debut, and Bill Wyman's 3rd album.
Charles Bronson.
Goodbye.
One Man Will. Death Wish 2. He's doing it for you.
Jimmy's Death Wish 2 came out in February, with Stuart Epps also credited for engineering and mixing. Based on these timelines, it's safe to think work on CODA was resumed by then, the first Led Zeppelin album to be mixed in the UK since Physical Graffiti 1974. Page's starting point for the new album was not the guitar, but a secret drum solo piece neither Jones nor Plant knew about, a fascinating and exquisite anomaly in their catalog, Bonzo's Montreux. Sessions were held on September 12, 1976 at Mountain Studios, Switzerland. Led Zeppelin and their families were living in tax exile there at the time, so this track had already an extraordinary set of conditions. A popular name in the industry, Mountain Studios was the same place where Yes did Going for the One, Rick Wakeman's Criminal Record, and ELP's Works 1. Engineer John Timperley worked with Page in '76. His resume included Yes Going for the One, the Billy Cobham George Duke Band live on tour in Europe, and Agora live in Montreux. but it was Tim Perley's previous work with military brass ensembles what proved to be the perfect fit for Page and Bonham's vision of a massive drum orchestra piece. These recordings managed to capture the big band effect in full display. Meticulous studio notes were made to build the final script for Bonzo's Montreux. We can read a letterhead Moonlight on the papers here, as Soul Studios used to be run by two previous companies. One of them was Moonlight Recordings. Page and Epps got the mixing board ready. Up to 23 tracks were assigned to John's kit. 2 channels for bass drums, multiple ambience mics, and a wide variety of percussion textures, symphonic timpani, congas, and timbales. The John Bonham Rhythm Orchestra got some additional treatments to an Eventide harmonizer Page bought midway through 1976. Speaking of which, Jimmy ran a keyboard through this thing to create the Caribbean steel drum effect we hear in the closing section. With surgeon's precision, every break, backward echoes, and effects were assembled into a cohesive structure that only shows why Jimmy sat in the upper echelons of music producers. Several takes were molded into a massive yet musical drum statement. One wonders just how emotional it was for Page to mix this, trying to mourn the devastating absolute. Rock and roll greatest drummer was gone. More than just a song, a cathartic cry for love in the name of a powerhouse legacy. The most fitting posthumous tribute to his brilliance. No guitars, no basses, no vocals, just percussive poetry, raw and unfiltered. The kind of piece that only truly reveals its weight and purpose when played at loud volume. There is much speculation as to the drum kit Bonzo used for this one. Either the Amber Vistalite, the Black Swirl Vistalite, the Ludwig Steel kit, or the staccato kit he later used on McCartney's Rockestra. I seriously recommend you check out Maestro George Frutis' take on this song on his Bonhamology channel to further expand the magic behind this project. If we carefully analyze the drum accents going on here, it's clear Bonham had guitar ears, because his ideas almost mirror an electric guitar riff. This 1976 session later inspired Bonham's 1977 US tour drum solo explorations, as well as a Latin percussion spotlight on In Through the Outdoors' Full in the Rain. Oh yeah, and the intro for In the Evening. So besides Bonzo's Montreux, what did Jimmy have in the Zeppelin archives to work with? First, let's keep in mind he did not have the BBC tapes he used for remasters 1990, nor the latter 2010s reissues. He seemed to choose material that could be properly remixed without having to restore tapes beyond reasonable timeframes. A pragmatic, always. Jimmy Page, the producer. So he had 1 track from Zeppelin 1, 2 cuts from Royal Albert Hall 1970, 2 songs from Led Zeppelin 3, 1 track from Houses, and 3 songs from In Through the Outdoor. 1968's Sugar Mama was worked on but discarded. Interesting to see tracks 15 and 16 assigned to backward drums and a lot of ambience or room sound. Hey Hey What Can I Do was put out as a B-side single to Immigrant Song back in 1970, so it's safe to think it didn't meet the contractual agreement condition of unreleased material. 7 tracks made final cut for CODA, including Poor Tom from Led Zeppelin 3. The drum kit here, the Ludwig Green Sparkle, which many say was Bonham's favorite kit. According to Stuart Epps, they did something to it, but he couldn't remember exactly what it was. My gut feeling tells me they applied some stereo expansion to the drum track to beef it up a la Bonzo's Montreux. Now, one of the chosen tracks was extra special. Robert Plant went to Soul Studios to conduct a historic last Led Zeppelin recording session to sing 1982 lyrics over an instrumental outtake. The song was Walter's Walk off the 1972 Houses of the Holy sessions. What Robert laid down on tape at Soul Studios were haunting verses that at close examination lead to speculation on Zeppelin's inevitable finale. Plant's vocal style sounds very much in the vein of feature single Burning Down One Side. You can further check the complete breakdown of how Walter's Walk's riff and idea came to be on my Making of series, episode 2. What we hear is Bonham's green sparkle kit, but unlike House's, the drum's stereo image is wider, something that seemed to be CODA's parameter throughout. The big room sound managed to integrate Robert's vocals into a cohesive vibe despite being 10 years apart. The metallic sounding rhythm elements here predate Guns N' Roses' Sunset Strip style by many years. Based on my Jimmy Page studies, I believe many overdubs and lead guitar parts were done at Soul Studios with the Roland Arsenal. Some chordal textures around the 4-minute mark sound a lot like Death Wish 2. A bootleg holy grail for Zepp fans, Bonham's 1978 drum outtakes from the Into the Outdoor sessions. The drum kit here, Bonzo's Ludwig stainless steel. Listening to this bootleg makes you understand why Jimmy chose 3 outtakes for release, plus there were rumors of a 1979 EP that almost saw the light of day in time for their Nepworth shows. You can check my Making of the Album series for further information on these tracks. Now, the final versions on CODA sound a bit different than the stuff on their 1979 album. Guess what? Stuart Epps briefly mentioned that he mixed the tracks at Soul Studios. While we don't know exactly what he did, the vocals and hi-hat sound brighter on Ozone Baby and Darlene than the Into the Outdoor sound. Guitar-wise, these feature Jimmy's Telecaster throughout, yet wearing and tearing feels different. Page's Wall of Sound overdrive sounds closer to the Roland GR500, especially on the open chords D and A. Unlike Ozone and Darlene, drums are not up front, but push back a bit to make room for the fierce guitar layering. Although it's hard to appreciate the bass, Wearing and Tearing is the Led Zeppelin Demolition Unit going against the critics who dared to call them dinosaurs. So 6 tracks ready, yet Page still needed 2 more for an album's worth of material. Because they couldn't technically use live material, Studio Magic was employed to match the requirement and used 2 cuts from Zeppelin's historic Royal Albert Hall 1970 performance. The drum kit here, Bonham's Ludwig Maple Thermogloss. Using 2 songs from this show does raise the obvious question if they could have mixed the whole concert for a potential release at some point in the 80s. The 23-track recording sheet shows there was much work put into it. We see several channels for solos, harmonies, and Roland synth guitar work. An EMS Synthy Hi-Fly was used to create a robust octave effect underneath a power chord chorus section. It's easy to distinguish the 1970 Marshall Highwood amp guitars from the 1982 editions. The first track on a Led Zeppelin record not credited to any member but original songwriters Benny King and James Bethia. Engineer Stuart Epps said he couldn't use the ambience audience mics for I Can Quit You Baby because of audience noise, so they went for an EMT digital reverb unit for depth and that rehearsal feel. Was CODA ready for a market release, say July 1982? No, and its date was pushed back. Page's Death Wish soundtrack came out in February, but the reason that resonates the most is this one, Robert Plant's solo career. You see, according to Peter Grant's book, neither Atlantic's VP Phil Carson nor him were sure about Robert's new band and tried to talk him out of it, which, considering Zeppelin's history 1977 through 1980, was just the wrong thing to do. Things escalated quickly and Robert was willing to walk away from Swan Song and Atlantic's universe into another label. An emergency peace treaty was worked out with Ahmet Ertegun. Robert held his ground. He was no longer the singer in Led Zeppelin, but an entrepreneur who, just like Page back in 1968, wouldn't follow the industry's playbook. And so, in June 1982, the same month as Chicago, Survivor, Steve Miller, King Crimson, and ABC, Pictures at 11 was released on Swan Song Records. It took many fans by surprise, but industry insiders knew Plant was eager to spread his wings, with the music almost 1 year in the making. He played the Prince Trust Rock Gala in July, yet he wouldn't embark on his official solo band tour until almost a year later. The Birmingham Evening Mail talked about John Bonham's 20-year-old sister Debbie fronting local band Aircrew. Movie theaters in both the UK and America were still running cult following screenings of The Song Remains the Same, but that was it. CODA had to wait, and then some more. August 1982, Bad Company's Rough Diamonds was released. The soundtrack to a rough breakup, no longer a good company but honoring their name, unfortunately. A nasty fistfight between two bandmates sealed the deal, and the group went their shortly after. Swan Song Records' second most profitable name was gone, so you'd think CODA was ready for September. Meanwhile, artwork duties were credited to both famous crew Hypnosis and One Assorted Images. While we know the first group's long relationship with the band, the second was a design company based in central London. Their new wave and punk credits points into CODA's art direction of retro minimalism through solid colors, empty spaces, and cut-to-the-chase visuals. Early design sketches contain a handful of ideas, from geometric shapes playing to 80s futuristic vibes to stylized logos, almost like a Zeppelin spaceship program, or yes, buffering into 90125. They slowly arrived at a defining red line and structure to an almost cartoon color background reminiscent of Into the Outdoors' exterior paper bag. CODA's back cover photo was set to an image of desert circular farms you can find in Africa and the Middle East. This could be interpreted as both the band coming to a full circle and the idea of movement, back to the concept of John Bonham's drumming, a state of flow, forever in motion, timeless artistry. The circular farms could have influenced CODA's typeface, 4 letters separated by a long line, with the band's new 80s logo sitting beneath it. Online theories say you can put the cover upside down and see a cross, but I honestly don't see it. Do you? The green typeface was a refreshing and subtle choice to conclude Zeppelin's studio journey. Looking at records released in 1981 and 1982, I found additional sources of inspiration such as Foreigner, Toto, British Alcatraz, Dire Straits, New Age Steppers, Status Quo, Bounty, Maya, The Undertones, Alan Mann Band, New Order, and yeah, Foreigner. But the biggest inspiration came from the Beatles' Rarities, released in March 1980, as it inspired CODA's Gatefold to the T. The Fab Four's images allowed the listener to immerse themselves in music history, plus the infamous Butcher shot as a weird bonus. So as you can see, CODA took cue from here. Now let me break down every photo on CODA's Gatefold. Early days and latter days were set to center shots of Bath Festival 1970 and July 1979 at Knebworth, almost a month before showtime. With this in place, they went through the archives accordingly. Melody Maker Awards September 1975. Strangely enough, it seems Jimmy's daughter Scarlett was removed from the original photograph. Holland 1969, which was the same show that the upcoming physical media release of Becoming Led Zeppelin is set to include as bonus material. Robert Plant at Swan Song's UK Party 1974, the band at Montreux October 1972, rehearsals at Manticore Studios November 1976, opening night Oklahoma 1977, Jones at Bath Festival 1970, Robert at Music Echo's Valentine Awards February 1971, Germany 1970 with British rock journalist Chris Welch, cut out, Jones circa March 1971, most likely Belfast. Page on May 1974 during the US trip where Robert and Jimmy went to an Elvis Presley show. Page once again, this time a March 1976 interview. Bonham Bath Festival 1970, Robert circa 1976, Page and Plant circa 1975, Jason and his dad circa 1975, maybe 1976. Backstage at Knebworth, yet Jimmy was cut out. The famous yellow paper photo shoot, November 1971. The Song Remains the Same US premiere, October 21st, 1976. Another one from October, this time Leaving Japan, 1972. Page Playing Cricket, September 1974. The band at the last portion of their Manticore studio rehearsals, January 1977. Page at Swan Song offices, July 20th, 1979. Robert Plant at Wembley's Empire Pool, November 5th, 1978. John Bonham Swan Song offices, 1974. Jumble Jones backstage Knebworth, 1979. Page arriving at Knebworth, 1979. Page Plant and Bonham, Indianapolis, January 25th, 1975. Backstage Bonzo on the All Right Now TV show, March 4th, 1980. Jones circa 1974, and John Bonham Swan Song offices, 1974. On the next episode, the finale of the CODA series, we follow the album into the real world, the marketing confusion, the critical divide, the chart rise and collapse, and how decades later Jimmy Page rebuilt CODA into something far greater than its 1982 debut.